Hello, my friends. I'm Maynard Eaton, and this is a Maynard Report, where we talk about culture, race, and politics. And this week, we have a riveting discussion about a movie called Vigilante, about Georgia's vote suppression hitman. Joining me to talk about this is a renowned journalist who produced this movie, Vigilante. His name is Greg Palast. Greg, welcome. Thank you so much. And you're getting rave reviews. It's a must-see example of first-class journalism.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to correct one thing, though, because our producers will be mad. I'm just the nose on camera, and you'll meet our star in a moment on this documentary, Vigilante, Georgia's Vote Suppression Hitman. It was produced by Martin Sheen, President Bartlett, my favorite president after FDR. So Martin Sheen's the producer with George DiCaprio and Stephen Nemeth, and as well as Maria Florio, who won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. And so we got a stellar team, and it's narrated by Rosario Dawson. And so that's a heck of a team. And thank you. Yes, we've been showing the film. It's available, by the way, for those who want to see it at vigilantemovie.com, free through the end of the runoff in Georgia, so that people will have that information. And that's thanks to a generous donation from Jamie Fox. Thank you, Jamie. A star of Vigilante, as you mentioned. Tell me a bit about your role, though. You are captivating in this film, compelling in this film, and you're a major in the service, right?
I'm a retired major serving right now with the Navy as a program analyst responsible for capabilities to take us into 2035. But in relationship to the movie, that is a wonderful piece that Greg and his team has put together. I participated in it, but only as a participant. But once I was able to see the end product, I was amazed at how much he pulled in terms of the history of what's been going on in Georgia and what I had to go through as an individual, just trying to vote. Wonderful.
Well, let's see a clip of what we're talking about so our viewers know exactly what we're referencing here.
So you didn't call him, but you challenged his right to vote or have his ballot challenged.
No ballot. Mr. Turner, you have been challenged.
Is this an attempt to remove a lot of Democrats, black people from voting?
Get out of my house now.
Voter fraud.
Law enforcement is going to the houses and places of employment and making people afraid to go out and exercise their rights.
Open and clear. We have a visual. Indeed, we have a visual.
And today to come out and not be able to vote, it bothers me to my core.
My life was on the line. I could go to prison. If I just commit suicide, this will be over.
Stop voter fraud.
They raided a voter registration office and tried to send all of these college kids to jail.
Call our voter fraud hotline.
Tonight, Governor Kemp has signed that controversial election bill. He signed Senate Bill 202 last night.
If you go back to the bill signing, you will see Governor Kemp sitting under a painting of a plantation.
Time to do something if we don't get it back in November.
Brian Kemp is preparing to ban books.
Whose vote? My vote, not his.
Are you removing black voters from the voter rolls just so you can win this election?
Wow. Greg Palast, people have said this documentary is revealing. What's your story here? What are you telling us? What are you revealing?
Well, we're revealing that, and by the way, it's about Georgia. But let me tell you, whatever happens in Georgia, this is the test kitchen. Georgia's the test kitchen of Jim Crow vote suppression trickery that ends up traveling around the U.S. Whatever the trick they pull in Georgia, they will pull it in other states. And we see this with in SB 2. The main story is that last year, after the Democrats swept the state of Georgia, winning both the 2 Senate seats and Biden beating Trump, SB 202 was passed and signed by Governor Kemp by a Republican legislature. And I'm not being partisan about this. I'm just telling you the facts, ma'am. And in that law, it included something called the unlimited vigilante voter challenge. That is, any voter, anyone in Georgia can challenge the right of any other voter to vote, any voter, and it's unlimited. So you had, for example, you saw the lady in red in the trailer throwing me out of her house. She personally, this is the Republican operative in Cobb County. She was running Brian Kemp's crony, and she was running for vice chair of the Republican Party, and she challenged the right of 32,000 Georgians to vote, overwhelmingly voters of color and young people. And I showed her photos of those people, of people that she had challenged. I said, you know this woman? No, I don't. Ever met her? No. Do you know where she lives? No. Ever called her? Ever sent her an email? No. But you challenged her right to vote. You challenged 32,000 people's right to vote.
And she kicked you out of her house.
And she kicked me out of her house.
Reporter. Why did you leave that house?
And what happened was she agreed to the interview, and she had ammo, and she had this automatic weapon. I kid you not, this modified Russian assault rifle, as it turns out, next to her door. So I wasn't going to argue with her. She was screaming at me. Her husband, by the way, actually jumped at me. I said, "Okay, I'm out of here." But I just wanted to know if she was, so she was challenging these people basically because they're voters of color. And mainly because they don't like the color of the voters of color's votes, which is blue. And but then there was another guy you'll see in the film who actually dresses like a vigilante. He likes to dress up like Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp's sidekick from the OK Corral. And this vigilante is the chairman of the Republican Party in Columbus, Georgia. And on the state committee of the Republican Party, he personally challenged 4,000 people, including the man we have joining us today,
exactly,
Gamaliel Turner, who is career military. Right now, he's a consultant who is as he mentioned, he is the expert on warfare of the future. He's trying to save lives of soldiers. And he was working on, I hope I'm allowed to mention this. He was working on improving a weapon that's used in Ukraine. And, this is a warrior who's given his life to protecting America. And this guy challenged his vote because he's assigned to a base in California, serving the country. He's assigned to work at
how did that feel? How was that? Here you are, a Georgia native serving our country, and you were rebuffed. You were rejected at the polls. Your father worked with Martin Luther King Jr., as I understand it, according to the film. How did this impact you, sir?
Just let me give it to you this way. I was born in the 50s. So the law that allowed us to have equal rights, the law that allowed us to vote, was not in place when I was a child. It didn't come into place till I was 11 years old. So you mentioned my father's association with the King family, the Abernathy family, civil rights movement during that time frame. As a child, I got to see the look in their faces. As a child, I attended, the church services prior to, the group going out to march or conduct the sitting-in. I was very familiar as a child, and you could call that PTSD if you want to, civil rights PTSD. I carry that with me. I carry that with me now. So when we talk about voting, I'm aware that even to this day, from back then all the way to this day, efforts across the board, across our nation, are out there to suppress the votes of color. And as Greg so adamantly said, in a lot of cases, the blue vote, but specifically votes of color. And in this case, we can get a little happy at times with our ability to vote and take it for granted, but I don't. And when I found out that I was challenged, it hurt. I almost lost it. I physically, mentally, emotionally almost lost it.
Well,
to
Major,
the point to where
understand that you've been rebuffed again. Have you been rebuffed again? Are you being challenged again in the runoff?
No, I have not been challenged again, but just being challenged, period. The first time I was challenged for the runoff for Warnock's previous runoff, it was surprising. This was something new to me. And it's amazing. Let me stop and make one point, because I want to make it before we go off the air. A lot of people don't vote because they use the excuse that my vote does not count, or one vote does not make a difference. What I will say to the masses is my one vote mattered. It mattered in that I wanted to vote, and if I had not checked to see what happened to my absentee ballot, I never would have known. I never would have received my ballot, one, and I never would have known that I was challenged, thus finding out that 3,000 other people in Muskogee County were challenged, and another 30-some thousand, close to 44,000 people across the state of Georgia was challenged. That's a significant number of votes. That's a significant number of votes.
How has this changed your life, Major, and the lives of others who suffered the same fate at that time? I mean, you're not alone in this dilemma, are you?
No, I'm not alone. I am encouraged to see young people being enthusiastic about voting. But what I would tell you is being enthusiastic is not enough. You have to be passionate about your vote. You have to own the outside of your life. Your vote is one of the most valuable items that you have.
That's true. Yeah.
As an American citizen. It is your voice. It is your difference, your ability to make a difference in this nation. And if it's taken from you in any manner, you lose that voice. You lose that voice. We cannot argue about who is in office. We cannot argue about what law is being passed if we have not voted. And we would not be where we are today as people of color, or a nation that was able to put a man of color into the White House if people were not passionate about voting. But we just can't sit back and assume that everything is hunky-dory. The process of voting is a smooth process and clean. It is not.
Greg, you're saying in this documentary and in other ways, the Department of Justice complaint you filed recently, that there's a conspiracy afoot to deny blacks and others their voice, as Major said?
Yeah, well, you use the term conspiracy. It sounds like people are getting together in a room and hiding this. They're like right in your face. SB 202, which was signed by Governor Kemp, is 98 pages of Jim Crow obstacles to voting. Okay, it's everything, and it's affecting this runoff right now severely. The tricks are insane. Like, for example, the number of drop boxes by state law, this new state law, they cut the number of allowed drop boxes in the 4 counties of Atlanta from 107 to 25. They removed 3 out of 4 drop boxes for voting. They've cut the number of early voting days, and most African Americans in Georgia vote early, as they do around the country, by either mail or by early voting days. So they cut the drop boxes, which, by the way, the mail-in vote in the last runoff went 2-1 for Warnock. He got he picked up 400,000 margin in the mail-in vote last time. So they simply virtually eliminated mail-in voting this time by cutting the runoff period from 60 days to 28. Now you say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that there's simply not enough time to print ballots, mail them out, get them back, and count them, because in Georgia, unlike other states, it can't just be postmarked. It actually has to be in the hands of the voting officials on election day. So what's happened is that mail-in voting, are you ready for this, has dropped about 80% because it's almost impossible to do mail-in voting. I know the Major has to mail in his vote from a distance, And by the way, I want to add, and so they've cut the period for runoff voting to virtually eliminating those mail-in votes, which go overwhelmingly Democratic. They cut the number of drop boxes allowed in Atlanta by 3/4, ballots which go overwhelmingly Democratic, while, by the way, they raised the number of drop boxes in the rural white Republican counties. The games go on and on with this. And in addition, that you have the vigilante challenge, though I have to say the major's action, we have to applaud this guy. We want to salute the major for his service on two fronts. In World War II, African Americans used to talk about fighting war on two fronts, fighting the Nazis abroad and fighting the fascists in the United States, stopping black people from voting. We're doing it again. So the major is a hero on two fronts, because when he was denied the right to vote, when his ballot was challenged, he got big time attorneys to go into court and get his ballot counted. Now that's one heck of a poll tax, I got to tell you. But because he did that, a lot of counties have been afraid to accept these vigilante challenges. I can't tell you, Major, I just want you to know how many thousands and thousands of votes you have saved, because people are pointing to your lawsuit at these. I was in Gwinnett County when Gwinnett voted 3-2. 31,000 people had been challenged, or 37,000 people had been challenged in Gwinnett County, almost all African-American voters and young people. They challenged 37,000 people, and Gwinnett County voted by just one vote not to remove those voters from the voter rolls. And I have to tell you, it's because of your suit. Now, they mentioned my work and the fact that I publicized your suit and your actions. But, basically you scared these guys out of taking away the votes of tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, you've been a captain of that ship. You've been a captain.
And I want to tell you, when the major says it's your job, it's not his job or your job, Maynard, or my job. It's every voter's job to work on saving their vote. Now, we called 800 voters on the hit list. And I understand it's very difficult for people to agree to go on camera or to be here like now on radio. Most people don't want to talk about the problems that they've had with voting. They don't want to go through this. But I got to tell you, the fact that Major Turner brought the actions, went on camera, has gone public, it's had a huge effect in encouraging people to vote, telling them how important it is, and saving their votes, because we've seen these challenges being rejected all over the place because they're afraid that people like the major will come at them with lawyers and publicity. And so you have to understand, you fight for your vote. And I just want to mention, if people have trouble voting, you go in and you find that you have been challenged. And sometimes you don't know. By the way, please look at your mail in the next few days if you mail in your ballot or vote, because the challenges, in the major's case, he found out from the county because he called and said, what happened to my ballot? You can vote, but your ballot may not be counted. Please check if your ballot's been counted. Take a look. There's a votetracks.org can tell you if your vote's been counted. The other is if you get a postcard in the mail that says you've been challenged or there's a problem with your vote, like it or not, you're going to have to go into that county office in Georgia. This is the rule in Georgia now. You have to physically go into the county office. And you'll see in the film, they told the major, no problem, just come into our office, 2,600 miles from where you live. But you have to go into the office. Please save your vote. And if you have trouble at the polling station, call 866-OUR-VOTE. That's 866 OUR-VOTE, 866-OUR-VOTE. And there are terrific attorneys standing by to help you out. Don't let them steal your vote.
Major, give me your response to the salute that Greg gives you and people across the country are giving you. How does it feel? Again, you sat at the table, your father sat at the table with Martin Luther King Jr. Are you feel like you're making the same sort of difference with regard to a new era, a new struggle for our folks?
I would say surprisingly, yes. Here's the thing. Prior to all of this, people our age, young people come up and say, how was it back then? How was it back then? And they talked about the collective whole back then. But here is a single incident that we can refer back to that says, this is yours. This is yours now. We've lived with this all our lives.
Right.
We look for it. We listen for it. There are many times after the election, ballots were found in the trunk of a car. Ballots were found burned in the garbage cans. We know that these things happen. It is enlightening for this generation to find out that these tactics are real and they're ongoing. I will be glad when they catch up to the fullness of the tactics that are being used. Greg indicated. It brings tears to my eyes. I think you see a couple of times Greg messed around and asked me a question that's associated with it.
We got you a couple times.
I got full of it. It touched me. It touched me. I didn't like it, but he brought out the reality of, my generation and before me, hurt and efforts associated with just trying to be accepted as an American citizen, not by color, just as an American citizen. And that's where we are for me. That's where we are for me.
Greg, you're sitting in Georgia now. We have a December 6th runoff. You mentioned to me that because of the lack of early voting, because of the drop box issue, you suggest or think as a journalist, Reverend Warnock might be perilous. His campaign might be in jeopardy.
Absolutely. I think that especially people who don't live in Georgia don't understand this. Yes, Reverend Warnock's the incumbent. He's well known. You have a questionable opponent. So it looks like it should be a walk. And the polls say that most Georgians favor Reverend Warnock, Senator Reverend Warnock. But forget the polls. It's not the polls. It's whether they let you vote. And in Georgia, this is an issue. This is not how people are going to vote, but whether they're allowed to vote and whether their vote gets counted. So when you take away mail-in voting, which is the preferred, again, this is something the African-American community relies on. Because many people in the African-American community are working 2 jobs. They've got kids. They don't have the luxuries. And they're in places like Fulton. I'm looking at the wait times in Fulton. The average wait time in Fulton is almost 2 hours for the early voting this week, which is stunning. Whereas if you go to
in line and can't even get a piece of pizza. You're right.
And in fact, we brought this out, in SB 202, literally, if you're waiting in line 2 hours, someone hands you some food or hands you a bottle of water. This is Georgia, remember. That's a felony crime. Brian Kemp and the GOP have made it a crime to vote. But you don't have to worry about getting water in Forsyth, where the average wait is about 10 minutes. So in the white rural Republican counties, you don't have the waits. And they have more drop boxes than they had 2 years ago. The state imposed more drop boxes. So you have it's a lot easier to vote if you're not in Atlanta. And that is, of course, the core of the African-American population in Georgia. They know what they're doing. Now, of course, they're trying to block a Democrat. But the thing is, to accomplish that means blocking voters of color, young people, especially in Atlanta. So they're making it, and then, so by removing 3/4 of the drop box, and by the way, little simple things that other states would find crazy. Like, for example, you don't have the drop boxes outside. Imagine, so they've now said 2 years ago, there were drop boxes outside the polling station. So you could, if you have a double shift, you're working at 7-Eleven at 2 a.m., you can drop off your ballot. Now the drop boxes are inside, which defeats their entire purpose because they're inside the early polling stations and they're shut down and cut off. So outside of the early voting hours, and remember, early voting hours have been cut from 17 days statewide to 5 or 7, and after a lawsuit, 7 days in Atlanta. That's all. It's gone from 16 to 7. And once again, all these impediments mean that Warnock is going to have an uphill slog because voters, and a lot of voters I know are going to mail in their ballots. They had a very short time to ask for them or get them. And because of that, a lot of votes are going to arrive after 7 p.m. on December 6th. If they go through the post office, they will all be disqualified you've got a huge, huge problem. You still have vigilante vote challenges, and there's a lot. We expect challenges to people's signatures, which does not happen in other states on the basis like you have here. And all these things are chipping away at Reverend Senator Warnock's, lead that the polls say he should be walking back into office. But they're just making it hard to vote. So we don't know what the outcome will be. We just don't know.
Finally,
yes, sir.
This sounds what Greg is outlining and talking about. It seems problematic. It seems sad, really. But what many people I'm here in Virginia are talking about, how is it in Georgia, two black men running against each other are so diametrically opposed? How do you look at black men challenge each other? One's in a pulpit in the church of Martin Luther King Jr., the other's been coached all his life as an athlete. How are they standing side by toe to toe? What do you make of this contest?
Well, this is not the first time. The whole piece and part is to dilute the vote, to steal the vote, to suppress the vote. You and I both know that is not a fair competition between abilities of one individual versus the other. There's a clear difference between one's ability to communicate and do the work. But if you don't mind, let me take a moment to share something a little personal. You had asked a lot about how is it with voting. On a personal nature, my wife did not get her absentee ballot. She'll be traveling out tonight to go to Georgia to take care of some family business, and she will take the time on Monday to go in and vote. Now, she did not get her absentee ballot simply because they did not put her mail to address in it. Now, I know that was not an accident.
Right.
Greg had talked about the number of ballots that are down. That's one way to eliminate the ballots. I'll give you a prime example. I don't know what happened was Gwinnett, Cobb County, where 1,000 ballots were not sent out, or 10,000 ballots were not sent out accidentally. But you notice that. You says, okay, we're going to correct that. We get it out to you. Whether they receive them on time or not, fill them out immediately and send them back the same day. If it was 1,000 votes, maybe 200 people didn't vote. If it was 10,000 votes, ballots, maybe 400 people didn't vote. We have to look at Georgia holistically. Georgia is 159 counties. If you are able to do something, anything, let's say an average 1,000 votes on whatever tier you want to play with tampering with the votes. That's 159,000 votes right there. So you ask, how is it that Kemp can be in office? How is it that Herschell Walker can be so equally close to an individual like Warnock? Because there are things happening in the background on multiple levels to make sure that every vote is not counted. And it's kind of hard to count every vote when you don't send the ballots out for those people addressed through absentee ballots, sending them out to them in a timely fashion. I'm going to share this point. Here was the gap. In the challenge process that brought me into the picture. It wasn't that I was challenged. And it wasn't more so that I called the registrar's office. I was the challenge of my vote, the gap, and that exposed it was the fact that they didn't send me my ballot. If they had sent me my ballot, I would have voted, I would have mailed it in, and I'd have gone about my business. I've been okay. I doubt very seriously that if anybody in Georgia would have known that any of us was challenged. And those challenged ballots, I guarantee you, would just be set off to the side.
Right, I got you.
That's very, by the way, I want to make this point. It's very important to emphasize what the major said. The way the challenge system works in Georgia, the major was almost lucky because he called and they said, you've been challenged. They normally don't tell you. You mail in your ballot. Someone challenges you. You don't know it, and your ballot isn't counted because someone challenged you. Now, they're supposed to send you a postcard. Now, it looks like junk mail. No one responds to these postcards. And if you get the postcard that says you've been challenged, you now have to go into the office. Remember, this gentleman is at the military base at Port Hueneme in California. He said, just go into the office and tell them, here's my proof I'm a citizen. Here's the proof that I'm a Georgian, and you're fine. That's all you have to do. Take a day off work, thousands of people, but they count on the fact that you don't even know your ballot's been challenged. This is what I'm very, very concerned about.
Gentlemen, we got to go, but I want to applaud you, Greg Palast, for investigative journalism and being an example of what this profession can do. But Major Turner, I really, like Greg said, you're fighting a war on two fronts. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your fighting spirit to bring this problem to light.
And I want to thank you, Maynard, for giving us this platform and remind people that for right now and through at least through the runoff, you can see the film Vigilante, Georgia's vote suppression hitman, for free at vigilantemovie.com, or go to gregpalast.com. We'll give you all the info.
This has been the Maynard Report, produced by Rick Clear. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Very welcome.